And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. As today, the Indiana Hoosiers snap their two-game losing streak by taking care of business at home against Rutgers. It wasn't always pretty, and there were actually a few tense moments there in the middle of the second half, but the Hoosiers finished strong, and they took their biggest lead of the game at the end of the game, 72-64, and that was the final score as Indiana gets back in the win column. And, we're going to break it all down. It was an imperfect performance by the Hoosiers, to say the least, and we'll break down the positives and the negatives. But ultimately, it goes in the books as an 8-point victory, and it moves Indiana to 6-3 in the conference. And right now, it's really important to remember that Indiana has put itself in a position here early in the year where now they just need to take care of business, and they'll be on track to complete their goals of getting back to the NCAA tournament. And so, as uneven as the performance was and as disappointing as it was in some respects, the Hoosiers still took care of business against a team that shot out of its mind for a good part of the game. And so there are certainly some positives to take from that. And we're going to break it all down on today's show. We've already got some questions coming in. So if you have questions, send them to us with the hashtag AssemblyCall on Twitter. You can also go over to the YouTube page and do it there. But we'll break it all down. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. I'm here with Ryan Phillips. Andy Bottoms is unlikely to join us today. Had some family obligations, although he said he might pop in. So you may see him pop in there, but probably not. It'll probably be me and Ryan breaking this game down. And I think, the banner moment today is really pretty clear, and it's that run in the second half that pushed Indiana to its 8-point victory. There was a point there in the second half where Rutgers was up 49-43, and Mack, their guard, had made 3 or 4 threes. In the second half, we were looking a little bit sluggish on offense, and I'd been pretty positive all throughout the game. If you follow the Assembly Call account on Twitter, you know that, I was feeling pretty good even early in the first half when the shots weren't falling, just because I thought the effort was there on defense. I thought the team looked ready to play, and I think that run at the end of the first half showed that. But the start of the second half just wasn't very good for Indiana. They couldn't get the offense clicking. Rutgers made some shots, in part just because they made some tough shots, and in part because Indiana's defense had its usual breakdowns. And, there was a point there where I finally tweeted out, okay, I'm a little worried now. And I'm pretty sure that was when the score was 49-43. It was a strange lineup that was on the court. It was Robert Johnson, Max Hotzel, Nick Zeisloff, Troy Williams, and Emmett Holt, and things just looked disjointed. But from that point, when it was 49-43, Indiana tied it up at 52, and then obviously they went on, an 8-point run from there to close the game out. And it certainly wasn't a dominant performance by any means, but they locked things down when they needed to. They started to make the shooting a little bit tougher on Rutgers. They started to get some easier shots, some better looks. I thought James Blackman Jr. really stepped up and got some key buckets for Indiana. And again, they did what they needed to do. And I think right now the difference between this year's team that is on track to achieve its goals and last year's team, which right around this time in the season really started to fade and fell short of its goals, is that last year this turns into a loss like that Penn State game. It turns into a game where you look at it and you're like, man, how could they lose this game? And this year those games are, okay, we didn't play as well as we wanted to, but at the end of the day, it was an 8-point win. And so there's some progress there. There's something to feel good about there. And so for me, that's the banner moment, that this team is taking care of business when they need to. And games on the road against Ohio State and Purdue, those are going to be tough games to win. We didn't play as well as we wanted to, and those end up as ugly losses. Come home, get things right against Rutgers, get the victory with obviously a tough trip to Madison coming up. But we'll break it all down. Let me go over to Ryan now, and let's get his rant on today's IU victory. What's up, Ryan?
Yeah, first of all, a win is a win in the Big Ten. I know this was a game that everybody was expecting a blowout in, but if you look at the standings, Indiana is 6-3 in the Big Ten, 16-6 overall. The 6-3 in the Big Ten, they're tied with Michigan, who is extremely beatable, especially now with Karis LeVert out, and then Ohio State and Maryland are the other 6-3 teams, and those are teams that Indiana has beaten this year. Yes, they lost to Ohio State on the return trip in Columbus, but they're essentially tied with teams they're even with. I mean, Indiana could, at this point, with only 4 road games left, if they went out at home, which, it's going to be tough to do. It's when nobody's sending that to them, just handing it to them. But if they went out, they could wind up second in the conference. Now, again, they lose a couple easy games, they could end up 7th or 8th because the conference is so tight. But you're looking at Indiana right now, and they're in a really great spot, as you mentioned. They're in position to accomplish their goals. It has not been pretty. There's no question that there have been games that Indiana has won that it probably should have won by a lot more. But a win is a win. I mean, with how poorly the first half and the early part of the second half went, the fact that Indiana won this game shows a lot that these guys at least are finishing well, and that's the most important part of the game to play well in is the last 5 minutes. And today, as you mentioned, they went on that great run. Two guys I want to talk about though, real quick, is Robert Johnson and Nick Zeisloft. I was ripping both of them early in the second half, just merciless. I was saying Robert Johnson's offering nothing, he should be off the floor. I said Zeisloft was doing nothing, he should be off the floor. Robert Johnson went out, nailed a 3 in a key spot, then hit 2 key free throws down the stretch, played very good defense. So I apologize to him. Zeisloft was doing nothing all day, then nailed 2 really big threes, had kept the play alive on an offensive rebound with a tip out that Hartman grabbed that was a really big play. So both guys really, they came out right after I was ripping them, and I think somebody on the bench was reading my tweets because they came back in and they had a fire lit under their behinds and played very well. So hats off to both of those guys. I thought they finished really well after really uneven performances in the beginning of the game.
Man, it was uncanny by Robert Johnson. I sent out 2 tweets, basically, calling him out, just that he was struggling, that he seemed out of sync, and I swear he made threes on the very next possessions each time. And let's take a moment and talk about him real quick because, I thought he made some big plays late that helped us win this game. And he's been a guy, he's been up and down. He came out really well, I thought, his first few games of the season. He's been up and down since the Big Ten season started. But he shows you those signs like today where he's really struggling. We know he's a little bit injured. He's not quite in sync. He airballs that 3 early. But when it's time to make a big play, he seems to make it. And that's why I think, yes, he's been up and down as a freshman. By the time he is an upperclassman, I really feel like he's going to be an all Big Ten level player. Like he's just got whatever that it is, I feel like he's got it. Do you get that same sense from him as you kind of project him forward?
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, and it's guys who play really well early as freshmen almost always hit a wall. It seems like James Blackman Jr. had about a 2 or 3 game stretch there, and he broke through it. And then, he's struggled in games since then a couple times, but mostly it's because teams are putting their best defender on him. And you're going to struggle if you do that, especially as a freshman. Johnson, I feel like, is sort of, it's almost like when a guy runs too fast and falls over because he's, almost getting ahead of himself. And I feel like that's kind of that's what his freshman season has been like. I think he got off to a great start. People were talking about, man, this guy could turn in triple doubles. I mean, because he was rebounding and assisting and scoring and everything. And so I think that it's just kind of this thing where he's almost like got to come back down to earth and sort of start again. And I think he will. I still believe that he can be that guy who consistently gives us 10 points and 5 rebounds, 3 assists this year. But he's just got to sort of package himself and get set. And I think today there were and maybe it's the knee injury. We don't know how confident he is in his shot. Lifting up on his jumper with a hurt knee. But there were a couple times he had wide open looks and he just passed them up immediately. He didn't even look at it. He just kind of grabbed it and passed it. And so I think that's just a confidence. His confidence is in the toilet. But he hit a couple of big shots and made a couple of free throws late, and hopefully that'll kind of boost him. But I agree, he's got something, and he's got the ability that if he stays around in 2 years, I think he'll be an all Big Ten guy for sure.
So I'm going to say something a little controversial here, and we'll get your thoughts on it. I feel a little bit safer saying this with Andy not here on the show today, but I actually thought Tom coached a decent game today, and I'll tell you why. Because, he talked on the pregame show about how he was going to switch up his starting lineup, which he very rarely does, and he said that he wanted to switch up the starting lineup to get a little bit more of a defensive presence in and to get a spark off the bench. And plus, he has mentioned umpteen times since that Purdue game ended how disappointed he was with Troy Williams' offensive decision-making, constantly taking the ball in, getting blocked by A.J. Hammonds. It was not a very good game for Troy. And I thought what Indiana did in the first half, Tom got exactly what he wanted to get with that lineup decision because, I know the game didn't start out very well, but in the first half, Indiana actually played pretty good defense. I mean, Rutgers only scored 0.96 points per possession. And this is a team that came in to the game scoring 0.96 points per possession. And for Indiana, just holding a team to its actual average is pretty good. It wasn't until the second half when they started making threes that number got a little bit kind of out of whack. But yet, if you look at Rutgers, they're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the country. And so if you're going to game plan against them, that's one thing you want to do is let them shoot threes. But anyway, I thought he got a good defensive start to the game, and then I thought Troy really seemed to be focused, and I thought he played really, really well in the first half. His numbers in the first half, 9 points, 8 boards, had 2 assists, really provided a spark when Indiana needed it because they didn't start out the game very well. And overall for the game, he played well, 14 points and 12 boards. So I know, again, it's disappointing, should have won by more. I like when I see a coach that seems to have a handle on his team, and he pushes a few buttons, and those buttons seem to work. And we've seen that not happen with this program late in January, into February, in past seasons. I think it's encouraging that, Tom kind of made this drastic change with the starting lineup, but I thought he got the results really that he wanted. And if Indiana shoots better in the first half, the final score of the first half looks a little bit better. But and just keeping the team poised when things could have gone wrong there in the second half for them to get the victory. So I know there's going to be a lot of criticism, but frankly, I thought he called a pretty good game today.
Yeah, I wasn't disappointed. I thought the team, like I've said before, I mean, a coach can only do so much if the team is just getting beaten on every cut, or is, you can take guys out, but if that sort of attitude and sort of permeates the whole roster, there's really nothing you can do. As for Troy, I thought his first few minutes in the game were terrible, and I think that what it was he went back to just playing all energy, no brain, and he had a couple turnovers. He kind of was just sort of out of sorts, and then you're right, he got in a rhythm and really provided what they needed to him. He did turn the ball over 4 times and had some of those damn it Troy moments, but he, clearly he played a great game, and he was probably, I think he and Blackman were the guys who had the best days. I mean, Yogi as well, but I mean, we expect that from Yogi. It's what we expect every week. But I thought, 14 points to 11 rebounds for Troy is a great game, and I thought that especially early in the second half when the team was struggling, he had a couple finishes at the rim that really kept us in the game, and he also had a couple steals on defense, which both of them were big. So, yeah, I thought that having him out of the starting lineup was a good move for today. I don't see that being the case at Wisconsin because we cannot be without his size. And athleticism against such a big team. So I thought that he did a very nice job off the bench. I just don't see that holding up. I think it was a send a message thing, and hopefully now, you can get the guy you had before back. I do expect Stan Robinson to stay in the starting lineup right now, though.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's talk real quick about Stan. We got a lot of questions coming in, both on the YouTube page and on Twitter, so we're going to get to them. Let's talk about Stan. Let's talk about James Blackman Jr. real quick. Starting with Stan, because he started, and he's starting for his defense. We know that because he's got the worst offensive rating on the team. We know all of the reasons why Stan struggles and why he gets criticized so much. But that's the other thing I liked is that, look, Stan played pretty good defense against Purdue. He was in there battling. He made some plays. And, again, Coach Crean has talked about that ever since that Purdue game ended. And that's another reason why I like the decision that he made, because we talk about hold guys accountable for their defense. Well, the guy that he thinks played the best defense against Purdue, he put him in the starting lineup. I mean, that's going to send a message that defense matters. We know we're a top 15 offense, but defense matters. And I thought Stan was solid against Purdue, especially in that first half. He was solid again today. 4 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. He had no turnovers, although he did have a couple of missed field goals that you can basically count as turnovers because they weren't good shots. So it wasn't a perfect performance by Stan, but I thought for the second game in a row, he came in and seemed to exhibit a better understanding of his role. And I got in an argument with a few people on Twitter about this. I know that Stan has really struggled, and sometimes you wonder, why is he out there? But the reason why I think Coach Crean is sticking with him and why I keep, rooting for him to be out there and not upset with his playing time is there's a good basketball player in there. Stan has unique skills that can help this team and this program, but he has to get a better understanding of what he does when he plays well. And obviously a big part of that is focusing on his defense, not wasting so many possessions either with turnovers or bad shots. And if he can do that, he's got skills that can really help win ball games, as he has shown us in a few games already as a freshman and this year, and I think these last 2 games. And so, what do you think of him overall? Because I agree with you. I think he's going to keep playing, and it starts on the defensive end.
I thought defensively he was excellent. Like you said, also 5 rebounds, 2 of them are on the offensive end. So you've got a guy with he may not provide a ton of height, but he's got super long arms and can battle for rebounds that way, and as long as he gets his positioning right defensively, can get as many rebounds as you need on that end. So yeah, I thought it was a good game for Stan. Like you said, you're not expecting anything offensively from him. Anything you get is a bonus. He hit both of his free throws, which is a good sign.
As he did against Purdue, which
exactly
is very helpful.
Which is and it's an unexpected bonus you're getting with him. So no, I think that he played a solid game today. I hesitate to say good because you want more, and you want him to be able to do some stuff on the offensive end, at least finish when he's near the basket. But yeah, I thought it was a solid game, and he stepped up and showed that he deserved to be starting in this one.
And James Blackman Jr. 20 points, 5 boards, 2 steals, and I thought some of his baskets were really timely. He bailed out Troy a couple times. Troy had a couple of bad turnovers, and his teammates fortunately were able to get the ball, and Indiana was able to turn it into buckets. But I thought James did a good job of varying his offensive attack. He went to the rim, and I thought he did a better job of going up strong and converting some of them. He made a few threes. Overall, a nice bounce-back game for him, too. And frankly, look, when he went down and it looked like his ankle was turned, it's one of those visceral reactions where you're just like, damn. If we're without – I know he's been up and down, but if we're without this guy and just the threat that he is, and on a day like today when he's making those shots, what he's able to contribute, that's a loss that this team probably can't overcome. Fortunately, it looked like he was okay, and he finished really strong for Indiana.
Yeah, that ankle will be more sore tomorrow than it is today because he clearly rolled it pretty badly. But he was able to play through it, and I think that won't be the case tomorrow. I think we're going to probably hear that he's sitting out practice or maybe a day or two because that looked pretty bad. And but to his credit, he laced his shoes up tighter and kept playing. That's a tough move for a kid who's 18, 19. So, not to just sit on the floor and writhe around. Because that's what you want to do. I've had that happen to me. That is no fun. But, yeah, no, I thought it was a very good game for him. And the key was that he's starting to learn that he's more of a threat from the perimeter when he can drive and when he doesn't settle for shots out there. I thought early on he was a little flat-footed. He missed a free throw at one point where I didn't even think he leaned forward at all. I think he was back on his heels. And then he missed a couple threes where I thought he was just completely, his jump was just sort of unenthusiastic, I guess is the word for it, and he was just kind of going through the motion on it. But then he really locked in, and he was the biggest thing for us offensively in the second half was him going to the hoop, finishing strong. And hey, if you're not going to finish strong, get fouled. If you're not going to be able to make a shot, that doesn't mean your drive has to be cut off. Go up into somebody, put the officials in a situation where they have to call a foul. He also got a charging called on him that was brutal, where the guy had his foot inside the arc and was moving at the same time late. But I appreciated his even though he got called for a charge, which he shouldn't have. I appreciated his aggressiveness going in there and. So that's nice to see. And again, it's guys fighting through that wall, those young guys fighting through that wall. And he's really, I think, answered a few games where he's been off. He's really answered, the call. I thought against Purdue that he hurt more than he helped in stretches of that game. And I thought today was a nice answer to that.
A few numbers that jump out that are good. Obviously, the offensive rebounding, Indiana grabs 13 boards. We did give up 10 to Rutgers, so that's not great. But I think the other one that jumps out, again, I always try and pay attention to.
Can I jump in real quick? I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, go.
But the offensive rebounds for Rutgers, I think, are a little skewed because of how many bad long shots they were taking. It
Hmm.
wasn't like they were getting tips around the rim. It seemed like a lot of guys taking, 17-foot jumpers inside the three-point line, getting a long rebound, same as when you take a three. And I thought that they were just getting some really nice bounces on those. So I really thought Indiana's rebounding was pretty darn good today. But when a team shoots long jumpers like that, you're going to get loose ball rebounds, and you can tell because the offensive rebound numbers. It was guys like Kadeem Jack, Bishop Daniels had 3. I mean, those are guards, and perimeter players. So you're just getting long rebounds falling right into their laps. So I really thought Indiana did a nice job on the glass and just got unlucky for some of those.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is, I think it's important to, pay attention to what a coach says after a game and in the pregame, and see if that translates to what the team is doing on the court. And this is why, I kind of mentioned that, I know, there's a lot of criticism going around for Crean. I mean, it's pretty much always going to happen, but especially after a tough home win against Rutgers. But, I thought he had the team pretty much ready to play today for as good as this team is going to be able to play in a lot of areas. You look at the assist numbers. Indiana has 14 assists, and no single player has more than 3. But it looked like everybody except for Max who played had an assist. And I think that's important because I think Coach Crean sounded really upset after the Purdue game about guys not making the extra pass and taking poor shots and not making the game simple. And I thought today it sure didn't look simple at times. Part of that was making shots we normally make in the first half. But I thought especially late in the second half when it got down to winning time, Indiana did a really good job of making the extra pass. There was one possession in particular after a loose ball, I think it was, where Yogi had a decent look for 3, passed it up to get James Blackman Jr. a better one, and he made it. And I think those are the kind of passes that Coach Crean has really been trying to get the team to make, and driving in instead of just throwing it up wildly, get the ball back out, get it to a guy who's in a good position to shoot. And I thought we saw more of that. So again, far from perfect in terms of the performance, but progress from what we've seen in the last couple of games. So let's go to a few of these questions. We've got some good ones, Ryan. Here's one from our buddy Andy Tuwalski. He says his suggested nickname for Stan is Verdell Jones IV. Seems to get a lot of hate, but only deserves it half the time. Here's hoping we see more and more of good decision Stan going forward. And I suppose, good decision Stan is kind of like good Troy, bad Troy. Both those guys, they really bring unique things to the floor. And we've seen the growth with Troy in a lot of ways, and hopefully Stan can continue to do that. Not an altogether terrible nickname there from Andy. But Andy has, I think, a better question here. And, Ryan, I'll go to you to get this answer, and I'll chime in after that. But what should we make of the fact that Holt is playing about 10 to 11 minutes per game during this Honorless stretch while we're getting crushed in the paint? Just a case of him being a limited freshman?
Yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. I mean, as we've talked about with freshman walls before, I mean, this isn't Lamar or any of these preseason teams. These are legit Big Ten players. Guys like Greg Lewis, Junior Etu, Kadeem Jack. I mean, they, regardless of the fact they play for Rutgers, these guys are legit athletes, and they're grown men in a lot of cases. And I think that Emmett is still developing strength, awareness, things like that. He's still getting used to the speed of the game, and he's great in stretches. He has stretches where you'll think, man, this guy should be starting, 4-minute stretch. And then he'll have another stretch where I think it was Etu flew right in and dunked right on top of him because he just had no awareness that the guy was cutting on him. It's not so much Emmett as it is just being a freshman, and you got to remember too, he didn't have the offseason that everybody else had where they were playing together over the summer and getting used to each other and things like that. He came in right before school started. So it's a lot of stuff, and I don't think that it's a knock on him, but I just think right now he's still a role player, and we've just got to kind of understand that. And maybe he can develop into a more significant role as the season rolls on against teams with more size where their big men don't play out on the perimeter. But right now he's not going to guard anybody outside 10 feet, and that's just the way it is until he has more time to develop physically and things like that. So I think he's a very solid player, and he's got a great future. I don't think anybody questions his future at IU, but right now he's just not in a position to do all the things you need that guy to do. Whereas I think Hartman, with his awareness and his ability to just kind of muck things up in the middle, is a much and be able to guard out a little bit longer than Holt can. I think he's just a better fit at this time. That said, I think as soon as Hunter comes back, he's in as a starter and probably playing 20-25 minutes if he can handle it physically. So because we'll just need that guy near the hoop. But I think that right now, if the choice is between Hartman and Holt getting minutes, you're going to default to Hartman because he can do more right now. Next year, that might not be the case.
And hold that thought on Hartman because we're going to get to him. The other thing to remember about Emmett Holt is that on a team with Noah Vonleh, Luke Fisher, Devin Davis, and Hunter Perea, Emmett Holt either isn't offered a scholarship or is redshirting this year. And, obviously Noah's in the NBA, Luke transferred, Devin had his unfortunate injury, and Hunter's hurt. And so Emmett is thrust into the lineup. And, I understand the kind of next man up thing. You don't want to change the expectations. But to a certain extent, we have to be fair to him. And so, to answer the question, I agree with you, Ryan. I do think that is why. And I understand the calls for Emmett to play more and for a guy like Jeremiah April to get in because you're seeing the size that's sitting there on the bench. And it's like, we're so bad down low. Why aren't these guys playing or playing more? And again, you can't put guys in before they're ready and give them so much more that they aren't ready to handle. As much as we've criticized lineup decisions on this show over the years, that's one I'm not really going to criticize because I think Tom's actually doing a pretty good job of managing the minutes with these young guys while trying to balance the big hole in the middle. You can't just throw Emmett out there for 30 minutes. And I think, kind of doing what he's been doing with Emmett, I think is the most productive thing both for now and for the future. Did you want to say something else?
Yeah, I just think that also people have to understand that if you throw guys in before they're ready and they get crushed, and just get run out of the building or something, then if you're a freshman, it can take 2-3 games to recover from that. It's so you don't want to. Guys' egos are fragile, especially when you're playing guys in the Big Ten, and so it's like throwing, we throwing Jeremiah April out there against Louisville or Michigan State, and he gets crushed. Who knows if he ever comes back from that? It's really not something. You can't mess with these guys' heads too much. And I agree with what you're saying, that Emmett, he probably is a deep bench player if we have the guys we're supposed to have. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have a bright future. It just means he needs time to develop. And right now, he's built like a really nicely built high schooler. He's not built like a Big Ten big man. And it's going to take time, for that to happen. He's got to be in the strength program for a while and things like that. So, it's just one of those things where people have to be patient with those guys. And you have to also remember that Crean runs a program. He doesn't run a team for this year. So you also have to look at the team and realize that I think people forget that because they played so much last year, Troy Williams is still a sophomore. Stanford Robinson is still a sophomore. Colin Hartman, and then you've got Blackman. Zeislov's been in the program a year. Blackman's a freshman. Yogi's only a junior. It seems like he's been here for 8 years. And then Robert Johnson's a freshman. So this is an extremely young team with no seniors. So it's, people have to remember those things. When these guys make mistakes, it's because they haven't been around that long. And, that's a lot of the reason. So.
All right, so let me ask you this. So here's, I guess what I'm seeing, and it frustrates me some. And, I try and stay optimistic. I try and stay positive. And part of that is, I think, having a realistic expectation for what this team can do on a game-by-game basis. I get that the expectation with IU basketball is NCAA tournaments and Final Fours and championships and competing for the Big Ten. I get that. So let me ask you, how do you balance, as an IU fan, with all that in the history and those as the expectations, how do you balance that with trying to take a realistic view of, okay, we get that's the standard, but this is where we are, and we've talked about, the guys leaving, all the reason why we have the big hole in the middle and why we're so young again and all of that, and that in and of itself is a frustrating conversation, but this team is what it is. And so how do you balance those expectations with trying to be realistic about what you're expecting from this team on a particular night?
Oh, it's really hard. People think I've been very easy on Crean over the last few years, Andy especially. But I think that part of it is the fact that I realize what the guy's working with. It's not like, and this year we don't have a big man really, a go-to big man. It's not like he wasn't trying to recruit big men. He had about 8 guys that he's going really hard after, and One decides to go. It was Good Luck Kanabu or whatever his name is. Went to UNLV at the last minute when he was going to Indiana, and you had guys, Vonleh bought into a 2-year plan, left. Fisher was told, look, we're going to make you the next Cody Zeller. It's going to take a couple years, but that's what we're going to do. He left. So it's not like really some things aren't the coach's fault. An 18-year-old making a decision, the coach can do all he can, but the kid's going to do what he's going to do eventually. So I think that you have to understand what they put themselves through. I mean, these guys sell out to get these kids here, and give their whole heart into it, the whole staff, and want these kids here. But sometimes you just miss on guys. It happens. I mean, that's realism. This isn't Kentucky where every 5-star wants to go there because they get showcased and then they can leave and they don't have to go to class very much. This is a place where we expect kids to help us get a perfect APR score and help us, be sort of a program that people look up to and things like that. So you're not going to get certain guys. Trey Lyles, God love him. I'd love to have him. But, he wants to go to the NBA next year, and he wasn't going to come to Indiana and do that probably. So it's just one of those things. You've just got to understand where the program is. And people say, well, Kentucky can win year in, year out with young guys. That's a completely different situation. And I think that it's hard to balance that. I want to win every friggin' game. I loved the year that Victor and Victor was a junior and Cody was a sophomore. I mean, that was so much fun because we got back to old school Indiana basketball and just expecting to win every single game. But
that's a team that had lottery pick NBA talent plus experience. That's why that was such the perfect setup. And it's been hard to get back to that because Tom is recruiting a lot of the NBA level talent. But he's having a hard time. Keeping guys around and kind of keeping the continuity that early group had. It just hasn't worked over these last couple of years.
Well, and I think that team was actually part of the cause of why there's something, because you had 4 1,000-point scorers leave. You had a lot of senior leaders leave. And then last year, people forget, that's only 2 years ago. Last year was the year after that. And we just had so many young guys. Nobody took a leadership role. Nobody got the team together. We had some guys just, not doing what they were supposed to and things like that. And this is the year after that. That wasn't that long ago. And it's just when you have that many guys leave at once, it's going to leave a huge hole in the middle of your program that you can't fix the next year. It's going to take time. And had Noah Vonleh stuck around, we could talk about that forever. But had he stuck around, I think this year is completely different. I do. I think I think we're a top 10 team entering the season.
Yeah, and and the other thing with the the season 2 years ago is just how it ended. It's almost like people forgot about how good it was while it happened. Anyway,
of course,
we're bringing up old stories here. What I want to get to, there was another question here that I wanted to get to. Okay, Colin Hartman, that's what I wanted to get to. So Andy, he says, if Crean's favorite stat is deflections and Jerod's is Colin Hartman things, is it just me or have his CHTPM, Colin Hartman things per minute, been down lately? Is this just a result of his new role? What do you think?
I think that probably has something to do with it. You're not seeing him come out like a ball of fire off the bench, but I think his shots also haven't been falling as well, as well as they were. And that's just a couple games, though. 3 games ago, 4 games ago, he was still doing Colin Hartman things. And today, I even thought in stretches you saw him grab rebounds, throw nice passes, grab a steal. I thought that he still does those things. It just, one thing is we're expecting them now, and so they don't jump out as much because we're expecting consistency. And he made some bad decisions today. There was a foul he had on a layup that you could tell he was mad at himself for, because he knows if you're that close to the hoop, either let the guy get the layup or hammer him so he doesn't get the shot off, and he was really upset with himself. So today was not his best game by any stretch. I thought he was okay. But, yeah, it's also, again, this is a guy who is only a sophomore, is coming off a knee injury, and hasn't played a whole lot. He's going to maybe hit a wall, too, and have to fight through it, especially when all of a sudden he's starting, and nobody expected that. There were people who didn't expect him to play this year very much. So, I think that he's probably down a little bit right now, but I expect him to bounce back, just like I expect all these guys to sort of catch their second wind and get back to that level they were playing at before.
Yeah, I mean, there was a certain, just think back about a month and a half ago, there was a certain novelty to Hartman being out there and playing the minutes that he played and being so good off the bench. You know, he entered today's game still leading this team in O rating at 132.4, and the next closest guy is Yogi at 124.4. You know, so he's been really efficient, and I agree that it's gone down a little bit as his minutes have gone up, but that's to be expected. You know, Colin isn't a, you know, he's not a top 25 recruit like James Blackman Jr. He's not a potential NBA player. You know, he's a solid player, and I think with more minutes, he's not going to be as efficient as he was. It's just not possible. But he's still, he still made some winning plays today for this team, and that's what's important about Colin is, he can play poorly for stretches, but he's still one of the 5 guys that you trust the most to be on the floor, which is why at the end of the game today, in a really big moment for Indiana, he's on the floor and he makes some plays to help this team win a game.
Yeah, I think that with him, it's interesting because you see him grab 2 offensive rebounds today. Both of them, he grabbed them and reset the offense, and he's a glue guy. I mean, he really is. He's the definition of that. And you say that he's one of the 5 guys you trust. I'd say he's more like one of the 3 guys you trust the most. I mean, really. I mean,
okay, who are they? Who are they? Yogi, Hartman, and who? Who else?
Yogi, Hartman, and probably Blackman at this point. Yeah, I mean, because he rarely will turn the ball over. I mean, he had 2 today, but you rarely see him just make a really boneheaded play, except for sometimes when he drives and gets blocked. But other than that, you can trust him with the ball, and I think those are the 3 most trustworthy. I mean, honestly, Nick Zeisloff's pretty trustworthy with the ball too, but you don't get the sizzle with him that you get with the other guys. You don't have the potential for a great play as much. But I think that Hartman is just this guy who he knows exactly what he can do, and he's really good at doing it. And yeah, he's down. Today was a bad game, but you've got to look at the season as a whole and the trends and things like that instead of just snapshotting one game. So that's my opinion on him. I think that overall he still played 25 minutes today and wasn't looking like a completely out of place.
The other thing we saw today is the formula for Indiana winning games. And what I mean by that is the formula is not Yogi having to put this team on his shoulders from an offensive standpoint. That just has not worked this year. As sensational as Yogi has been scoring the basketball in some of our bigger losses, this team's recipe for success is a game like today, where Blackman scores 20, Yogi and Troy both score 14. You get solid contributions from guys like Robert Johnson and Nick Zeisloff with 8. And I thought this is much because I thought Yogi, even though he only scored those 14 points, I thought he was really good again at picking his spots. When to force a shot. There were a few times where we had a couple bad offensive possessions, and he took it upon himself to get a shot. And maybe you question how good the shot is, but he made it. And it was really, I thought, a point where the team was looking for someone to step up and do something. And I think this team is so much better when Yogi can pick his spots to do that. But when Troy is really kind of setting the pace on offense, then when Yogi has to do it all. And again, I just thought today was another example of that. A solid effort by Yogi, and keeping it in the family, a great appearance by Doc Libby on Big Ten Network, and some mighty kind words from Stephen Bardo, who seemed rather smitten by
somebody's got a crush.
Yes.
Yogi. My favorite play from Yogi in the game was when, with the shot clock running down, he took a pass off a curl and just stopped dead in his tracks and banked a shot home. I mean, that was yeah. There is maybe one other player in the country that could stop on a dime like that and rise up with his shoulder square and bank it in. I can't even think of anyone else, but I'm sure there's got to be one. But it's just, that was so unbelievable just to stop in his tracks and bank it home. And it was a bucket when we needed it, and he went off the glass. God, he's a man after my own heart. I loved it. It was beautiful.
It was beautiful. Okay, so let's look ahead a little bit. And we've got a couple questions here that are going to help us do this. The first question is from Kevin, and he asks, any chance today's sluggish play was related to looking ahead to Wisconsin? My answer to this is absolutely not, and here's why I say this. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and some people did on Twitter, but I didn't feel like the team came out and played that sluggish in the first half. I thought there was a lot of effort. I thought guys were playing hard, especially once Troy came in and kind of changed the tone and tenor of that game. I don't think we were great offensively because we were missing shots and to a certain extent a little bit too keyed up early. But I definitely did not see a team that was looking past Rutgers. I saw a team that has struggled a little bit on the road for 2 straight games. It took them a little while to find their footing. I certainly don't think Indiana played, well in the first half. But I thought they played hard, and I thought the focus was there, especially on defense, as evidenced by the fact that, hey, we actually held a team under 1 point per possession for a half. I think that shows you right there that this team was locked in. So I didn't get that sense at all. What did you think?
Well, a couple things contributed to that first half, and one of them was that Rutgers was hitting shots that they don't normally hit. I mean, that was, they were draining shots from the outside, and they're a terrible outside shooting team. But also, I think that these Saturday afternoon games, and I said it on Twitter, are always ugly for some reason. I don't know what it is, whether it's guys just not having as much focus because it's not a night game and they don't have time to lock in, or what, or maybe just enough time during the day to prepare for the game. But these Saturday afternoon games are usually brutal, and they're just not fun to watch. They're ugly, and teams don't play like themselves. And yeah, I mean, you got to deal with it because everybody else deals with it, but it's a consistent pattern. And so I think that you're right. They came out and they were playing hard. They just weren't playing smart, and they were, playing hard but not really prepared. I mean, you'd see, like I said, Blackman was flat-footed on shots, and you almost never see that. He's got such great form on his jumper, and guys, throwing the ball out of bounds and things like that, that you just expect this team to do better. But you're right. I don't think it was looking past Rutgers at all. I think it was just a symptom of, almost running plays without really having a set goal in mind and things like that. And I think that's a symptom of the early game. I really do. And that kind of thing happens consistently with these games. So my little pet peeve. But if these broadcast networks want better games, they should put them on at night.
Yeah, and then you come out in the second half, and I mean Rutgers goes off. They hit 4 5 threes in the first 8 minutes of the second half, and all of a sudden you're looking up, and it's like, holy crap, we're down 6 against a team that we're favored by 10. What the hell is going on? And that's why I was impressed with the way this team played in the last 10 minutes of the second half, because they got it together. They said, we're not going out like this against Rutgers. We can't lose this game. And they turned it around, made plays, got some stops, and did what they had to do. So, I know we all would have loved the easy 20-point victory, and certain IU teams in the past that were perhaps better would have done that. But I still think for this team and what it is and where it is, I still think there's more to feel good about coming out of this game than to feel bad about. And speaking of that, here's a question from Andrew Barr, who says, we're projected to go 7-2 in the last 9 games, losses to Wisconsin and Maryland, both on the road. I don't see us winning all 7. Your thoughts? Well, here's the first thing, and actually the KenPom stats are updated. We actually dropped from 46th to 49th after this game. He had predicted about a 13-14 point victory, only winning by 8, so we dropped a little bit. But it's true. If you look at it, all the projections for the games coming up, the Wisconsin game is projected as an 83-68 loss with a 9% chance of an IU win, and frankly, that's about what I give them in that game, but we'll get to that in a moment. And Maryland, that's projected as a 78-71 loss with a 27% chance of victory. And every other game for Indiana, including the home game to end the regular season Saturday, March 7th against Michigan State, is projected as a win. But here's the thing. If you actually look at the season projection for KenPom, because we're 6-3 in the conference right now, his actual season projection for the Big Ten is 11-7. So he's actually projecting us to lose 4 of those games. And basically what that says is, each of these individual matchups, Indiana's, it looks like they've got this advantage, especially with a lot of them coming at home. But it's a little bit of distrust just in Indiana's consistency and saying, they're going to lose 1 or 2 of these games that maybe they should win. And maybe that's a road game at Rutgers or at Northwestern, or, maybe Iowa or Michigan State comes in and wins one of those final games. And frankly, do I think that we'll go 7-2? I think this team is capable, but I think more realistic is probably 6-3 over these last few games, maybe even 5-4, which gets you to 11-7, which gets you to 21-10, and probably gets you in the tournament. So I don't think, So I guess to answer your question, I agree with you. I don't see us winning all 7. I think we're capable, but even if we don't, that's okay, and I think this team can still get to where it wants to go. What do you see, Ryan, when you look forward at the schedule?
Well, I think it's going to depend when Hunter Pereira comes back. If he comes back for that Purdue game at home, I think we can win that one, especially shooting in our own building. If he comes back and he's there for Purdue, Rutgers, Northwestern, Iowa, I think we win those. And then Michigan State's always a toss-up. You never know what you're going to get from a Tom Izzo coach team. You know they're going to be prepared, and you know they're going to play hard. So it's really about how IU handles its business. Against Maryland on the road, look, we match up well with Maryland. That's just a team that is like us and doesn't have a ton of size to rely on. If we make shots, we can win that game. Do I favor them in that game? No, absolutely not. Maryland will be the favorite in that game, and I would pick right now. I'd pick Maryland to win it. But if we hit shots, we can beat anybody. I mean, Wisconsin is probably watched that Purdue tape and is salivating at being able to just throw it inside and beat us up down low. So Kaminsky is a guy who plays on the perimeter a lot, and then he'll set up down low. But I think they're just going to stick him on the block and make us guard, and then we'll have Troy Williams and Sam Decker going head to head, and quite frankly, when we're on defense, that isn't even close to a matchup. And they've just got such depth that it's going to be really hard to beat Wisconsin. I think you just with that game at Wisconsin where they apparently never foul inside the Kohl Center, it just doesn't exist, I guess, because officials seem to never call them, so that means they must not be fouling. But it's going to be a very, very tough game mentally and physically. I think the keys to look for is how well does Indiana play regardless of the final outcome. Do they stick to their offense? Do they get things? Do they, are there encouraging signs? If there's none, like that Michigan State game, then maybe we got a problem. But it's just these guys have to worry about how they play. Wisconsin's going to do what it does, and it's going to be tough. But as far as the rest of the season goes, no, I don't see them going 7-2 because any of these teams, I mean, Minnesota at times has played really well this year, could jump up and beat you. I mean, if you have an off night. So you never know what's going to happen, and that's why these projections and things like that, you really don't know what's going to happen. One injury changes the whole thing. So I think this is a tournament team. I think if you go 11-7 in the Big Ten, I don't care how many teams in the Big Ten are ranked right now, it's still one of the two toughest conferences in the country because everybody can beat you, as we saw today and we saw with Rutgers beating Wisconsin earlier in the year. So I think that if you get through that schedule, you deserve to be, higher than an 8 seed if you can get 11 wins.
And Andrew, what's interesting is that you look at Wisconsin's projections; they're 7-1 right now, and clearly they are favored in every one of their remaining games. But the Ken Pom projection for them is 15-3. So similar to Indiana, he hasn't predicted to win every game, but there's, he's just kind of predicting two random games in there that end up as losses. Whether that'll happen, I don't know, because Wisconsin's looked pretty damn good. But that just goes to show you, I mean, that's what conference basketball season is like. We all know that. And you just, you try not to step in landmines. And Indiana had a big-time opportunity to step in a landmine today, and they avoided it, which is why, despite all the reasons to be disappointed in this, let's take our win, let's smile about it, and let's move on. Ryan, do you want to say something, or do you want me to make you feel better about the IU-Wisconsin game? Because I got a few numbers that are going to make you feel a little better about our chances.
Please, anything to me. I lived in Milwaukee for 2 years, and I had to listen to Wisconsin fans so much that please do something to make me feel better.
Okay, because I'm a little undecided on who I'm picking here, all right? Even though I will say this. I think Wisconsin having a 91% chance of winning just based on what we've seen of them, based on the matchups and just the roster compositions of the two teams, Indiana's history in Madison, I think that's fair. So what could help that 9% come to fruition, become true? Well, this number is not going to make you feel better, okay? Wisconsin scoring 1.25 points per possession, including today's Iowa game. That's first in the country. Indiana's defense is not good. We know that. It's nowhere near first in the country. It's down in the 200s. So you just look at that, and actually Indiana's defense is now 239. So you just look at that and you think, okay, Wisconsin might score 120 points. And they might. But could Indiana score 121? And that's where I point to a couple of these numbers. Number one, Wisconsin is not a team that turns people over a lot. They are 258th in the country in defensive turnover possession at 18%. What has killed Indiana in games that it's lost or been non-competitive in? Turnovers have been one of them. Okay, so this isn't a team that that really turns the ball over a lot. So if Indiana can play smart and take care of the ball like they did for most of today, that's going to help. We know that for Indiana to have a chance, they're going to have to make threes. And Indiana is one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. Coming into today, actually including today's game, 40.2% from downtown. That's 13th in the country. Wisconsin's one defensive weakness, well, in addition to obviously not getting a lot of steals and not forcing turnovers, is they give up three-pointers. And they're actually 242nd in the country, giving up a three-point percentage of 35.4%. So I look at this game and I see that Indiana has one shot. Because, I mean, look, if Indiana keeps Wisconsin under 1.2 points per possession, I'm going to be ecstatic. And I realize, when you look at the standard for an IU team, you want Indiana to play good defense, yada, yada. Well, this team doesn't do that. And so if Indiana can somehow, with the potential National Player of the Year, Frank Kaminsky, keep them under 1.2 points per possession, I'll be ecstatic. So that means that for Indiana to somehow pull off this upset, they're just going to have to score. And that means that they've got to protect possessions and they've got to make threes. We made 15 against Maryland. We're probably going to have to do that to beat Wisconsin. And that's tough to do on the road in a tough environment, all that stuff. But we've got the shooters to do it. If Yogi can shoot well, if James can shoot well, if Robert can make threes like he did today, if we get shooting from Hartman and Zeisloft, that is not an inconceivable thing. And so if the Hoosiers can make those threes, and if they can, push the tempo at all and get the game a little bit at their pace and get it into more of a transition game than it is a half-court game, which will be, yes, easier said than done, there's a chance there. So I think it all comes down to, do you think Indiana can go on the road and make their threes? And if they can, this could be a ball game. All right, how crazy am I?
That's a lot of words to say we have a tiny chance.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Okay, we do have a tiny chance. But I feel like that 9% is now bigger than I thought before. But in all seriousness, I mean, if you're looking at a game where Indiana's going on the road where it's like, oh my God, it's this gargantuan team, it's this David Goliath, like that's how we feel. Even though it's, we're 6-3 in the conference, we're not some destitute team. When you look at that and you actually look at the matchup, yes, if they played this game 9 times out of 10, Wisconsin or 10 times, Wisconsin's going to win 9 times out of 10. But for a team, I feel better about our chances to pull this upset because I feel like what Wisconsin allows on defense actually fits into what we want to do on offense. And if we can do it, there's no reason we can't go up there and at least compete. I mean, they're going to kill us on offense. We know that. We're not going to be able to stop them. But kind of like that Sweet 16 game against Kentucky when Oladipo was a sophomore, we might just be able to just go toe-to-toe with them, score. And yeah, maybe it's, maybe you get into a game that's like 100-90, but I feel like we've got a better shot at winning that type of game, and maybe it could be that type of game. I mean, all we're going to hear for the next 3 days is how little chance Indiana has, so I'm just trying to give us some optimism going into that game, and I really feel like we got a chance. And
I will say this team plays to its competition. It has all year, and in big games it has stepped up, except for at Michigan. That's the only – Michigan State, I mean. But that Michigan State team was coming off a loss, and they never lose coming off a loss, especially at home. So, you got a Wisconsin team that's just kind of going along in their schedule. They beat Iowa today pretty solidly. It wasn't a great win, but – so, yeah, I mean, maybe you got to catch them on a bad night, too. I mean, that's the only way you're beating Wisconsin with our rosters, if you catch them on a bad night. So if they have a bad night, we have a good night. Of course you can win. What would make me feel better is if Frank Kaminsky somehow fell into, like, a bottomless pit, like at the end of Tom Sawyer or something. But
just for a night.
Yeah, just pulled an Injun Joe and fell off a cliff for an evening and then came back and was fine the next day. That would make me feel better, but yeah, I would still pick Wisconsin in this one if we're doing the pick. I would pick Wisconsin, but I'm not saying IU has zero chance. It's about 9%. I think that's a fair number.
Man, I can't. Here's the thing. I don't know that I can actually utter the words picking against Indiana. Like, I'm just not sure that I'm capable of doing it. Because what's going to end up happening is before the game, I'm going to talk myself into why we're going to be able to win. And if we end up winning, I'm never going to be able to forgive myself for picking against us. So just for my own heart as an IU fan, and because these numbers actually did make me feel better, I'm picking the Hoosiers. We're going to go up there to Madison, and we're going to do it. And you can think I'm crazy, and maybe I am, but in the afterglow of finally getting back in the win column and knowing how this team can shoot threes, I'm picking them. That's it. And there's probably not a whole lot else to say because probably no one's going to trust anything else that comes out of my mouth for the rest of the show after that. But I'm doing it.
I will say, if this was a home game and they were coming into Assembly Hall and it was going to be a live crowd and all that stuff in our favor, I might go out on a limb and pick them. I just think on the road at that barn, it's really hard to at the Kohl Center, it's just really hard to win games.
It is. I mean, and it's going to take an otherworldly shooting performance. We basically need to go in there, and Yogi needs to do what Jordan Taylor did to us a few years ago. You remember that game when Jordan Taylor came into Assembly Hall and just, what did he make, like 15 three-pointers himself? But Yogi's capable of that, I mean, so, the thing that really hurts, I wish we had a guy like Hunter for this game who could come in and play 20 to 25 minutes of just semi-competent D down low, because then you'd feel a little better about stopping Kaminsky. But, man, when you watch Wisconsin, you really just appreciate how well-constructed that team is. They lose Trayvon Jackson, but Bronson Koenig steps right in. He's a really good point guard. You got the big guy in Kaminsky that can, go inside, outside. Nigel Hayes is a really good player. Sam Decker is, one of the, I don't know, he may be the best NBA talent on that team, depending on where you fall between he and Kaminsky. They're a really good team, and I will say this: I will be glad to get on the other side of this game, because frankly, they're a team I enjoy watching, and I'm going to be rooting for, come tournament time, because I just, I like how they play, I like how they're constructed. So it'll be, if nothing else, it'll be, a really good measuring stick for Indiana. And hopefully we're able to go up there and show ourselves well. And not have a Michigan State or Purdue performance, and do some of the things that Coach Crean has been talking about that we saw more of today.
Yeah, if they go into it with the attitude they have nothing to lose, then I feel much better about this. It's not, if you go into that atmosphere and say, well, I hope we don't get embarrassed, as opposed to, hey, we got nothing to lose, let's just go, and then you feel a lot better about it. And I think against Maryland they kind of felt that way too. It's just sort of like everyone's hyping Maryland, no, we're not ranked, let's just go. And they did.
But, and don't you think we can? Like, we don't have to go in there desperate. That's the thing. If we were, 4-5 right now, and it's like, holy crap, we've got to get a win. We need a road win just for our resume. We've already got a few road wins. We've got 6 wins. I know that sometimes when you read the IUBB hashtag during games, you feel like this team is like 5-20. But this is a team that's done some things this year. We've beaten some teams. We have a good resume. It's an NCAA tournament team. So I think, combine that with the fact that, yes, this team's still going to know that this is a top 5 team. They're really good, all that stuff, and no one's giving them a chance. Hey, Tom Crean has shown that he's pretty good with his back against the wall. When he can get his team to take an us against the world mentality, he's better when he's got the crowd of Assembly Hall behind him, and he won't have that. But, yeah, I think all of these reasons, I'm telling you, man, that 9%, it's starting to grow. It's getting bigger. It's getting bigger. And I'm just glad we don't have Andy here, providing the. I'm just glad it's not 2-on-1; it's 1-on-1.
Yeah, and I mean, look, this is a team that if it gets that chip on its shoulder mentality, like nobody believes in us, it certainly has the talent to beat anybody, and I mean nationally, except for maybe Kentucky. There is a talent level on this team that can get things done, and so, yeah, the matchups don't favor us. This, that, the other thing. But if this team gets a fire lit under its ass and plays like that, yeah, it can compete with anybody.
All right, well, we'll see. I realize I run the risk of dropping down in our picks challenge, but it's all right. You know what? I'm feeling better. I think this team's going to go up there and play well. I really do. I do think they're going to play well. And even if they don't win, I think this is a game that's within 10 points. That's a closer game than people think. We'll see. Time will tell. That game is Tuesday night. Hey, what time is that game Tuesday night? Do you know?
1 sec. Let me check.
Yeah, we'll look at it. Then we'll get to some final thoughts here. It's the
7,
ESPN game, right?
7 Eastern.
7 Eastern?
Yeah, 7 Eastern.
Okay, good. So it's early. Nice. All right. Well, with that said, again, Hoosiers win 72-64 today. An uneven game, certainly not a perfect game. But I think those final 10 minutes, Indiana showed you what you wanted them to show you getting this win. Ryan, any final thoughts you have? I'll state mine, and we will get out of here and get ready for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, my final thought is just 6-3 and 16-6. Nobody thought Indiana would be there right now, regardless of the some ugly wins and some games that people thought they should have won by more, whatever. However you get there, you're there, and it's not survive and advance at this time of the year. It's just survive and move on, because you're not advancing in a tournament or anything, but you're moving on to your next game, and especially in the Big Ten, man, you just gotta win games. And we beat Penn State by 3. We had a really tough game at Illinois on the road that we won by 6. We beat Ohio State by 3. You beat Nebraska by 5 on the road. I mean, these aren't blowouts and they aren't statement wins like the Maryland game was, but they're wins. And if you get a bunch of those at the end of the year, you look back and think, okay, this was a good season. 4 wins for this team to get to 20 on the season. Something that I think so many people thought was impossible just a few months ago. Sure, we've adjusted expectations. We expect a lot more out of this team now. But again, 6-3 in second place in the Big Ten and 16-6 right now are places I think a few months ago a lot of us would have killed to be at, and we're there and looking like a team that can jump up and be dangerous in as the season moves on.
Yep, I agree with you. And, again, I think when you look at today's game, a lot of people talked about how the offense early wasn't very good, and it wasn't. And I think that's what is encouraging, is that Indiana was actually able to use its defense early in the game. Again, holding Rutgers to basically their season average. Defense led to offense in the first half. And with an offensive performance as poor as what we saw from Indiana, just in terms of its ability to make shots, a lot of times that turns into a 6-7 point deficit. And so for Indiana to be up at halftime because of its defense, I thought that was good. And then we saw what we've seen in a lot of Indiana victories today, as we mentioned. Yogi being able to pick his spots and big contributions off the bench. And today that happened to come from Troy Williams, who we know is going to be probably a starter moving forward. But I thought Troy really responded well to sitting on the bench. And shoot, his mom, Patty, she sent me a tweet during the game. She didn't even know why Troy was benched. She didn't even realize he wasn't going to start. Was wondering why. And, so maybe Troy didn't even know until right before the game. Who knows? But what I do know is that he responded well to it. And, he showed the kind of leadership that you want your most talented players to show. And so I thought that was really impressive from him. And just as a team, being able to make the big plays late, Robert Johnson stepping up, Nick Zeisloff making shots, James Blackman Jr. really leading this team from a scoring perspective, all those things. I know an 8-point win over Rutgers at home doesn't look all that impressive, but I think there were some things that happened in this game that were points of emphasis from the last 2 games that if they carry forward can really be big for Indiana, and we might look back at this game as a little bit of a transition game. You have that huge win over Maryland, which probably is going to be the peak of Big Ten season. You go on the road, you have a couple of tough losses, you've got to dust yourself off, get back together, and finish the second half of the Big Ten season well. This program has not always done that under Crean. In fact, they haven't often done that under Crean. And so a game like today where your coach has some things he wants you to improve on, and you do it. Hopefully, we look back on that as kind of a turnaround game, and this team can go 7-2 or 6-3 or even 5-4 to close it out, and get themselves to a point at a minimum of 11-7 in the conference where, we're not sweating out Selection Sunday. We're just thinking about where we get seated, because I think for everybody that was the goal coming into the season. And so let's not start holding this team to a higher standard than that. I think that's still the standard, and hopefully this is a game that we can grow from and that can get us to that point, because certainly we all know this team is capable of that. And so that's what we want to see. Anyway, thank you all for listening. Thank you for paying attention to us on another episode of the Assembly Call. Make sure you get on the email list, assemblycall.com/subscribe. Andy wasn't able to be here tonight or today for the show, but he is going to do his normal stats analysis. We will have our usual email out to you tomorrow morning, so you can read that before you go on about making your Super Bowl preparations for the day. Ryan, to close it out, any thoughts on the Super Bowl? Do you want to make a quick prediction? As a 49ers fan, I'm rooting for the Patriots, Deflategate and all. I hate Seattle, so I just want to see someone beat them. What are your thoughts?
It's hard for me to pick against Pete Carroll for years as a USC fan.
That's right.
For years. I will say this. Pete Carroll has never had a team lay an egg in a big game. Even when they lost to Texas, that was one of the greatest college football games of all time. The Seattle's going to come out fired up. I believe they're the less talented team in the game, but I think they pull it out at the end. This run they're on is pretty impressive. I think it'll be a great game, though. I think it's a pick 'em game. I really do think it's a pick 'em game. And I mean, I've never disliked Tom Brady. I'm not a fan of Belichick, but I if he won his 4th Super Bowl, I wouldn't feel bad about that. I think he's a great guy, and one of the best of all time. So either way, it's going to be a fun game to watch. I would pick the Seahawks just based on the fact that Carroll just seems to always get it done, and they're on a roll right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a true pick'em game. I would not bet 5 cents on this game because I could make an argument either way. I just want it to be a good game that goes down to the wire. Hopefully it is. And all I want to say is I wish the Firecrackers were doing the halftime show instead of Katy Perry, but that's just me. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. We will talk to you Tuesday night after Indiana pulls the shocking upset over Wisconsin that I predicted. Have a good night, everybody.
Later.